Good morning. The Clinton campaign backing a recount in Wisconsin, but not without criticism from the president-elect. Hi, everyone. I'm Melissa Francis, and I'm in this Sunday morning for Maria Bartiromo. She will return next week to Sunday Morning Futures. So what will come of the recount effort in Wisconsin and possibly two other states? We're going to hear from a prominent GOP senator in a few moments. Plus, what now for the United States' relationship with Cuba? With former dictator Fidel Castro dead and President-elect Trump set to take office, we're going to talk to former CIA Director James Woolsey. And the market's on a roll, have you noticed, since Election Day? What will this week bring? We're going to get to that with our panel as we look ahead on Sunday Morning Futures. President-elect Donald Trump bashing the effort to recount votes in 3 states, calling it ridiculous and a scam. That's surprising, right? Green Party candidate Jill Stein officially requesting a recount in Wisconsin on Friday and continuing to raise money for recounts in Michigan and Pennsylvania. The Hillary Clinton campaign now joining the effort. Mr. Trump firing back at the plans last night, tweeting, quote, "The Democrats, when they incorrectly thought they were going to win, asked that the election night tabulation be accepted. Not so anymore." And this morning tweeting, Hillary Clinton conceded the election when she called me just prior to the victory speech, and after the results were in, nothing will change. Joining me now is Kansas Senator Jerry Moran. He is a member of the Senate Banking Committee and the Senate Appropriations Committee. Senator, thanks for joining us. When you look
Good morning,
at
Melissa.
When you look at the numbers surrounding the recount, Hillary Clinton would have to flip Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and Michigan in order to turn this election around. What do you think are the odds of that?
Well, I think the odds are nearly zero. And so we're going through some efforts that seem to me to be unnecessary. Our country historically, presidential candidates, those who have lost, have rallied around those that won and brought the country together, and I think that's important at this point in our country's history. If there are legitimate allegations about any kind of cyber tampering with voting machines across the country, then in my view, an election official in one of the states is probably not the place for that consideration to be had. If there's really serious allegations, legitimate ones, then I think this is a matter for law enforcement, the FBI, or intelligence agencies. But this seems to be one of those political efforts that at raising money and stirring the political pot.
Well, I mean, a lot of people are calling to mind recounts of the past, but if you look at the actual raw numbers in Michigan, where the person requesting it has to pay for it if they want to have a recount, he's up by 10,704 votes. Wisconsin is 22,000. Pennsylvania is 70,000. But in the issue of a recount, when it actually changes, aren't we usually talking about more like maybe a 1,000 vote margin? These are big margins, no?
Absolutely. History really probably isn't the perfect guide, other than we've had this sense in our country that elections mean results. Results means moving forward for a new president. And in these instances, nothing that is evident would suggest that the outcome of an election, this election, would be changed. And so it seems to be something less than a legitimate effort to determine the outcome of an election. And that's what a recount is about, is who really won. And in this case, that's been determined. And in fact, as has been indicated, Secretary Clinton conceded that she lost.
The Green Party came forward and said that they looked into the possibility that the results were hacked or some votes were hacked. This was an early theory we heard circulating, and they've decided that they don't have clear evidence of that, but they're still interested in a recount. And as a result, more money is pouring into her coffers. At last count, it was just under $6 million for this recount that I think she raised during the whole campaign. Is there any evidence, though, that any of that money is coming from Hillary Clinton or Hillary Clinton supporters?
Well, I don't know whether there's evidence of that or not. I've not heard that, not seen that. And if there is, I assume that will become known through media and other sources. But again, there's no evidence of hacking that I'm aware of. But again, that wouldn't be a determination to be made by an election official in one of the states. that's a serious violation of federal law, and the allegation has been that it's been done by other countries, that's an intelligence, FBI, law enforcement issue, and it has nothing to do with the efforts to raise money on a website to do a recount in one of the states.
As usual, the hypocrisy on this has been rich all the way around. I mean, from every side, you have Jill Stein stepping out and, wanting to help the process and sort of leaning towards Hillary Clinton if she did, in fact, win the state. But in fact, if you look at her number of votes, if she had been out of the race, there are a lot of places where Hillary Clinton would have won if those voters had gone to her instead. Hillary Clinton herself criticizing Donald Trump at the third debate and on the campaign trail when she said that he hinted that he wouldn't accept the outcome of the election. I think we have a soundbite of that. Do we have that? Let's listen. Oh, sorry, I was wrong about that. We don't have but you can imagine what she said. I'm sure it echoes in your head because we heard it so many times when she said, can you believe it? This is sort of the first candidate in history who said they're ahead of time that they're not going to accept. I'm horrified. They're not going to accept the outcome. But hypocrisy is what you see in politics, no?
Melissa, unfortunately, I think that's true. The facts don't change, but the rhetoric changes. And I'm of the view that we have a solid election process in the United States. Yes, there are errors or flaws, but I know I have been in courthouses, in county clerk's office and election offices across my state, and there are lots of citizens involved in the process, people who come just to work the polls, who come just to count the votes. And those people, in my experience, are doing everything they can to get it right, to make sure that the votes are counted correctly. It's not about trying to steal an election. And so, in my view, Americans historically and rightfully so have accepted the results of an election. And that's where we should be today as compared to, your rhetoric changes depending on whether you're winning or losing.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that makes it tough for people who are upset with the outcome is the popular vote. And they talk about the fact that Hillary Clinton received something like 2 million more votes than Donald Trump. Do you think that there is an appetite in this country now to maybe rethink or look at the Electoral College system?
Well, we certainly have the Electoral College system created by our founders. It's in our Constitution, and that was designed for a particular purpose, to force candidates to pay attention to all states. And while there's always been concern or criticism of the Electoral College, again, we ought to make the decision about that not based upon who wins or who loses, but the value of that Electoral College. And this isn't the Electoral College debate ought to be a separate one from what happened or what people are claiming happened in this election.
All right, Senator, thank you for your time. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
The president-elect paving a path forward with Cuba post-Fidel Castro. What will relations between the two countries look like under a Trump administration? And Ambassador James Woolsey joins me next for more on that one. And remember, you can follow us on Twitter at Sunday Morning Futures. Stay with us as we look ahead on Sunday Morning Futures. President-elect Trump discussing the future of the U.S.-Cuba relations in the wake of Fidel Castro's death. Mr. Trump saying his administration would, quote, do all it can to help the people of Cuba, a job that will probably fall to the president-elect's top diplomat, the Secretary of State. A part of Mr. Trump's statement reads, quote, though the tragedies, deaths, and pain caused by Fidel Castro cannot be erased, our administration will do all it can to ensure the Cuban people can finally begin their journey towards prosperity and liberty. Joining me now is Ambassador James Woolsey. He is the former director of the CIA. Sir, thank you for coming on the show this morning. Let's jump right to it. How do you think that a Trump administration will deal differently than the Obama administration? It's probably the most important question going forward, on Cuba at least.
Well, as it did on Iran, the Obama administration has negotiated in a very giving fashion with the Cubans. They have not held to a firm requirement, for example, that political prisoners be released and religious discrimination stopped before they would take the steps to improve trade and the rest. And as a result, the new administration coming in is having to move uphill against concessions that were already made by the Obama administration, and that's a shame, because that means that we haven't given up, but we've made it harder. The government, the Obama administration, has made it harder for the incoming administration to get a better deal, to take a strong line, for example, on political prisoners, and succeed before releasing any change permissions for trade and the like.
Those on the side of President Obama would argue that what we were doing wasn't working, that we had isolated Cuba. You know, they talk about people driving in cars from the 1950s, that they don't have any modern goods, and that by isolating the people, we were punishing them and not the administration. It hasn't worked. So open the doors to the fruits of what comes from the West, and, you know, the people will rise up, or, you know, their situation will be improved at least. What's wrong with that argument?
Well, I think, generally speaking, the Cuban-American community in Florida and the rest of the United States has been right on this. Our problem is not that we've seen too tough a line coming out of the U.S. government on these issues. It's that we haven't seen a tough enough line. And I think that the Trump administration would have a much better opportunity to get a better deal out of the Cubans before going along with some changes if these gratuitous concessions essentially had not already been made by the Obama administration.
You know, one of the surprises of the election was that Donald Trump got more of the Hispanic vote than people thought he would, and a lot of that came from Cubans who were unhappy, like you said, about what President Obama had done. Earlier today, White House Chief of Staff Reince Priebus was on with Chris Wallace, and he said talking is fine, but action is something that will be required under Trump. And when asked about reversing the opening on Cuba, he said absolutely. He's already said that would be the case. There has to be some movement from Cuba. How do you think that will be received by Raul Castro and those in charge in Cuba?
Oh, they won't like it at all, but one pretty good guide to policy toward Cuba is if Fidel and Raul didn't like it, there's probably something good about it. And we are not in a situation, I think, such as the Obama administration seems to imply, in which there's just something bad out there. Nobody's really responsible for it. If we just all get together, can't we all get along? That whole patter, I think, is dead wrong in dealing with totalitarian dictators. There is a source of problem here. It's the Castro brothers and the dictatorship they've imposed on Cuba. And the excellent Cuban people deserve a lot better than that. They deserve a tough stance from the United States, I think, to help them.
Yeah, before we run out of time, I wanted to get your opinion on what's going on in the seems maybe still ongoing race for the White House. I understand you have some opinions about this idea that the Russians were able to hack into our electoral process.
I don't know if they've been able to hack. The problem is that if they do, about a quarter of the voting machines in the U.S. now, as a result of so-called reforms after the year 2000 hanging Chad mess, about a quarter of our voting machines don't have paper attached to them. They're just electronic. So if somebody succeeds in hacking, trying to get it all straight is very difficult. The other thing that goes on is that the Russians, year in and year out, not so much just for this election, practice something they call disinformation, which is changing the underlying story over the long haul and devoting hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people to doing this. This is a serious problem. They use it for anti-Semitism. They use it to attack the church. They use it for all sorts of purposes. And it would be surprising if they had not tried to use it in the current circumstances.
Like where? I mean, where would you have seen evidence of this along the way? I mean, are you talking about WikiLeaks? Or are you talking about something more subtle?
No, I'm not talking about WikiLeaks. I'm talking about a long-term Russian effort to undermine confidence in the West, and particularly in the United States, in its electoral system and its voting system, and its principles of freedom and rule of law. It's not confined to this election. This is something that the Russians have a lot of people working on. According to Ion Pacepa, P-A-C-E-P-A, the head of Romanian intelligence in '79, when he defected to the United States, there are more people involved in deception in Russia like this than were in their armed forces at the time.
And are you saying, do these people reside in Russia? Are they here in the U.S.? Are they all over the country? Where are they doing their business?
The Russians work pretty much everywhere on something like this. They get a story written with the spin that they want in one place, and then they get it published in another part of the world, say in South Asia. Then they get it confirmed by someplace else. Then they cite it. Then their statesmen give speeches about it. It's part of an overall effort to, as they say, to disinform, to screw around with history.
Yeah.
And that is, it's dangerous because it's so much of a commitment by the KGB and its follow-ons, FSB and others, and the people who do this in Russia. We need to get on top of it and understand how it works.
Yeah, I mean, when you explain it first, it sounds like political spin, which we see all the time, but I understand what you're saying is the difference is rewriting history that has already occurred and undermine confidence in the basic tenets of our system. So it's
exactly
different. Yeah, Ambassador, thank you for coming on. We always appreciate your time. Have a great rest of the weekend.
Good to be with you.
President-elect Donald Trump inviting several people over to Trump Tower tomorrow. Not me, though. I don't know what happened. I didn't get an invitation. He's going to continue to piece together his cabinet. So who Mr. Trump will be meeting and how soon we might expect some more announcements. Our next guest weighs in as we look ahead on Sunday Morning Futures. President-elect Donald Trump holding a series of meetings tomorrow at Trump Tower in New York City. There he'll continue working to fill out his administration. Among those who will reportedly see Mr. Trump, former Securities and Exchange Commissioner Paul Atkins, Sheriff David Clark of Milwaukee County, you know him, Wisconsin. And for more on this, let's bring in Anthony Scaramucci. He's a member of the President-elect's Executive Transition Committee. Mooch, thank you so much for joining us. Let me ask you, I mean, off the top, Secretary of State, it's getting like a little achy and uncomfortable. There's so much back and forth. You know, there's people in the campaign tweeting, people calling this unseemly. Is it time for him to make a decision?
Listen, because I'm inside it, it's interesting to see the outside perspective, but inside I don't really see it that way. What I would say about the inside is that there's a deliberative process. There's strengths and weaknesses to every candidate, just like there would be for you or I, Melissa. And
right.
So I think what Mr. Trump is doing, the president-elect is doing, is really just trying to figure out who's going to fit his agenda as it relates to foreign policy, how will that knit into the domestic policy. One of the big things that the president's concerned about is ISIS, and so I think the Secretary of State, he wants that person to be able to work really well with the NSA and obviously the eventual Department of Defense Secretary. So to me, taking a little bit more time to get this right is the thing that I think the American people want from the president-elect.
Definitely no rush on the other post, but with this one, there's just so much, Mitt Romney's getting a little trashed and bashed in the process. So if it does end up being him after he's taking so much incoming fire right now, Rudy Giuliani taking some incoming fire as well.
Yeah.
I mean, is it damaging the person that eventually takes the post? And who do you think is leading?
Okay, so I personally do not think so.
Okay.
Both Governor Romney and Mayor Giuliani are tough people, resilient people. Both have been in the rough and tumble of campaigns and seen eggs and tomatoes thrown at both of them. So if those are the two people, and it's one of the two, if there's another person involved, at the end of the day, the president-elect is going to make a great decision for the American people, and one that fits in with his agenda that he wants to prosecute over the next 4 years.
A lot of interesting people
Those
on the
guys
docket
can take
tomorrow.
it, Melissa.
Yeah, they can take it. Okay. A lot of interesting people tomorrow. Oklahoma's Attorney General Scott Pruitt. Sheriff Clark, somebody who's been on our network a lot, very interesting, very outspoken, very colorful. He's got a book coming out. He has a big fan base. He doesn't mince words. Elected, he runs as a Democrat, but his name is being thrown around for Department of Homeland Security. He obviously knows everything about policing, but terror, do you think?
Well, listen, I mean, again, I think what we would like to explain to the American people that there's a whole series of people that are being interviewed because of Sheriff Clark's personality. He's going to be the one that the media focuses on the most. But the message from inside the transition team is we're trying to provide the president-elect with all of the information we can give him and the pluses and minuses of each of the people.
Yeah.
And the greatest thing about President-elect Trump is that he's really taking the time and the deliberation. And so people are like, well, why hasn't he named this person or why hasn't he named that person? Well, the answer is you want him on behalf of the American people to really run a formal hiring process as opposed to a political favoring process or a process that would be designed the way Washington typically works. We want to design this process to be the way the president-elect works, which is deliberative, thoughtful, and let's bring the A++ players in and help me pick the best person.
Before we run out of time, I want to ask you about something you know a lot about, Treasury. I mean, because this is something, obviously, you're steeped in markets all the time. How is the person, I'm not going to ask you to tell me who he's going to pick, because I know probably he's the only one that knows that, if he even knows yet. But what different direction do you think we would see coming out of Treasury under Trump than we've seen now? What will be different?
Well, number one, I think we're going to put together a tax plan that will streamline taxes and reduce the burden and simplify the tax code and reduce the burden of taxes. Number two, remember, out of Treasury, that's where all the sanctioning comes from. And I think the president is going to want to use the sanctioning, perhaps, if we get into some trade issues with people. Remember, we want fair trade. We just want to even the playing field. If you look at these documents, the documents are unfair to the United States right now. And to make them fair, you may need the help of the Treasury Secretary. So we need somebody with a strong backbone, somebody that's very principled, and somebody that really understands President-elect Trump's agenda and is going to be forceful in helping them implement that agenda.
Do you think that somebody comes from a corporation, from Wall Street? Who's the best type of person to do that?
I think the best type of person has three characteristics. One, someone that the president can trust. Yeah. Number two, somebody that knows the policy intimately. And the last thing, and this is super important for me, and I've watched this, in the heat of battle, is this going to be a person that's going to survive the foxhole test? Are they going to be running towards the bullets, Melissa, or away from the bullets like some of these politicians do? So we want people running towards the bullets to help the president-elect when he needs it.
It's an interesting point you made about policing the sanctions and helping with that. That's an interesting way to look at that. Good point. Anthony Scaramucci, thank you so much.
Thank you.
House Democrats reeling from their election day losses. Leadership elections are coming up this week. Can Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi hang on to her spot in the face of a challenge? A member of the DNC joins us. That's coming up next as we look ahead on Sunday Morning Futures. House leadership as an Ohio congressman fights to take over the top seat. Representative Tim Ryan challenging longtime top House Democrat Nancy Pelosi when members vote Wednesday to decide who will be the next minority leader. Joining me now is Michigan Congresswoman Debbie Dingell. She is a Democratic National Committee member and the former Michigan chair of Al Gore's 2000 campaign. Thank you so much for joining us. Do you think Ryan has a chance?
Melissa, it's good to be with you. And look, I have a great deal of respect for my colleague, Tim. He, like me, gets in our gut what's happening in the Midwest. But no, I don't think he's going to be elected minority leader. And I'm one of the people supporting Nancy Pelosi right now because we're a very disparate caucus. And while he and I feel very strongly about the Midwest, and that's a voice that's got to be heard, we need to hear all of the voices. That's who we are as a Democratic Party. We need to, I'm not okay, you're not okay. We need to learn how that's how we're going to win. And I think Nancy Pelosi's best positioned to bring that we together.
It's interesting, though, to hear you tying your message to him. You know, you're saying you have the same feelings and beliefs as him, because I think you understand that what he's saying really strikes a chord. He said, we are perceived in middle America that we are tied to Wall Street and we're tied to big money. And in that sense, Nancy Pelosi looks a heck of a lot like Hillary Clinton. When you look at who's backing her, how much money she has in the bankroll, you know, and how long she's been in politics.
You know, first of all, when I don't view people looking at us tied to Wall Street. I mean, Bernie Sanders says that, well, that's a problem. What I see is people think we've forgotten what it means to be a working man or woman in this country. They don't hear us talking about the issues that matter to them. And as I've said repeatedly, they don't want a lot. They want a job that's going to give them enough money to live in a safe neighborhood, buy food, and be able to go to a doctor. Yeah. They're tired of trade deals that are shipping their jobs overseas. And something nobody's talking about is pensions that are not in any way an entitlement, that they've paid money in. They're scared they're not going to be there. And I'm grateful that Nancy Pelosi's talking about Social Security and Medicare, because that is one of my passions that nobody has talked about during this last election.
Yes, but if you look at how the election came out, I mean, it does seem like he's seizing on the idea that the American public wants change. Nancy Pelosi is not seizing on that idea. I mean, if you look at, yes, Hillary Clinton won the popular vote, but everything from the electoral vote to governors to senators to House, I mean, local governments, Republicans really swept. You're not afraid that you need a change at the top of your party?
You know, respectfully, I'm going to tell you that we've got to have somebody that's going to pull us all together. She has already announced potential changes. We'll discuss at the caucus on Wednesday. She has put out 3 communication co-chairs that absolutely reflect the diversity of this country. Hakeem Jeffries from New York. These are people she's going to nominate. Sherry Bustos from Southern Illinois, who's a blue dog. So, you know, she is hearing and listening, and I think trying to respond to the caucus. I'm certainly going to be a voice that's not going to go away in any way, shape, or form.
I understand that you do have a vote when it comes to who's going to chair the DNC. That's another position that's in transition over there. The favorite, Representative Keith Ellison of Minnesota, is that who you support?
I have not announced my support for anybody. Keith is, like Tim Ryan, is a good friend and a colleague. But I think we've got a lot of soul searching to do, a lot of listening. I think we've got to go through that process first, figure out what this party needs. That election's not to the end of February, and I think we need to take the time to listen, to understand, see who are the candidates before. I'm certainly not going to commit, and I hope others are going to wait and do that soul searching first.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned, you know, Bernie Sanders' name earlier. When you look at the leaders on your side of the aisle, do you see things moving more to the left? I mean, even when talking about Representative Ellison, you know, people say, oh, well, he has the support of Chuck Schumer and Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders. And these kind of more extreme people to the left are who are coming forward in the party. Is that the direction the Democrats are moving?
I think we've got to be very careful to be an inclusive party that has everybody in it. We have different viewpoints. We have different perspectives. And our strength comes in figuring out how we are that there's a place for progressives. There's a place for working men and women in the Midwest that just want to make sure they've got a job and that their pensions are there. The coasts that care about the environment. But the environment doesn't mean that you don't care about it in the Midwest, too. We've got to find our party is strong when everybody feels like their voice is at that table.
But that's what it seems like Hillary Clinton was trying to do, and it didn't work. I mean, she's kind of trying to be all things to all people, that I can be on the left on this, I can be, you know, more centrist on this, that we're including everyone in, and that what people were hungering for is the specific, you know, the person that's really targeting what, you know, millennials loved Bernie Sanders. Trump had his big support. Passionate, smaller groups of supporters. It's sort of what propels a candidate forward. The broadness may not work.
I'm going to say this to you. My district is one of the most diverse districts in the country. I have Ann Arbor, which is a lot of progressives, a university town, and the downrivers, which are good, hard-working men and women. I work for all of them, and they know I work for all of them. I understand what their issues are. I'm the first person to oppose trade deals. And by the way, said a year and a half ago, Donald Trump was exciting people because he opposed trade deals that were threatening those jobs that were going to be shifted overseas. But when I have the largest population of Muslims in the country. When I had a Muslim soldier that something was wrong, I fought for him. You can do both.
Okay. Thank you so much for coming on today, Congresswoman. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Now here's a look with what's coming up on Media Buzz. Let's check in with Howard Kurtz. Howie, what you got cooking this morning?
Good morning, Melissa. Well, a holiday smorgasbord. We're going to start with the coverage of Donald Trump meeting with those network executives, the New York Times, the coverage of this ridiculously long shot Wisconsin recount. And we'll also take a look at Twitter shutting down some alt-right accounts and Facebook grappling with fake news. Seems to be a bit of a scourge. And I've gotten a lot of reaction to this one on Twitter. Why are the NFL's ratings down? Are people just getting sick of football? We oversaturated? Is too much politics? All coming up at the top of the hour, Melissa.
Interesting, although I have to admit I'm going to be watching football later on today. But going back and forth. So I never miss you, but I got to dip in on that football too. Thanks so much. We look forward to your show, Howie.
Thanks.
Once upon a time, President-elect Donald Trump caused outrage by suggesting he might not accept the election's results. Do you remember that? Now that shoe is on Hillary Clinton's foot. How's it fitting? Our panel is here to discuss as we look ahead on Sunday Morning Futures. When Donald Trump said he might not accept the election results, and Hillary Clinton called that horrifying. Well, now she's jumping on the Jill Stein bandwagon to have votes recounted in Wisconsin. Green Party candidate Stein has raised millions of dollars for a recount and indicates she may do the same in Michigan and Pennsylvania. Team Hillary says it would join those efforts, too. All right, let's bring in our panel. Ed Rollins is principal White House advisor to President Reagan. He's a chief strategist for a Trump super PAC. Jessica Tarlov is Democratic pollster and senior political strategist for Schoen Consulting. We've got Steve Moore on hand as well. He is a Trump economic advisor and Fox News contributor. Steve, I'll start with you because you have the disadvantage. You're not around the table here with us. What do you think? What do you think about this whole thing? I mean, on one hand, there's a lot of hypocrisy there. On the other hand, everybody's a hypocrite in politics. Come on.
That's true. Well, look, I guess I'd start by saying denial isn't just a river in Egypt, and I think that the Democrats are still in a state of denial about what happened in the election. It would be one thing, Melissa, if this election were decided by, say, just one state, but for the most part, Donald Trump won an electoral landslide. I will say this, that if the Democrats challenge this and try to change the election, I think there would be a bit of a civil war in this country. And one other thing, you look back at history, one of Richard Nixon's finest moment was when he did not contest the election in 1960 that may well have been stolen from him. And I'll also say the same thing to Al Gore, who accepted the results after they were confirmed. But I think Hillary Clinton has to step up and accept these results.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Al Gore, took it a long way. But still, going back to what Hillary Clinton said on the campaign trail, let me play that soundbite. I'll get Jessica to respond.
Donald said something, well, he said a lot of things that were troubling, but he said something truly horrifying. He became the first person running for president, Republican or Democrat, who refused to say that he would respect the results of this election. That is a direct threat to our democracy.
See, Jessica, this is what played wrong in the election, is this holier than thou. How could Trump possibly say this about something where we're like, well, if you don't trust the election, you can ask for a recount, and now she's doing just that.
Well, the Clintons are kind of piggybacking on the Jill Stein effort. I think if Jill Stein hadn't done this, they wouldn't have brought it up. And frankly, I mean, I'm not in denial. I know we lost fair and square, and I know we have a lot of work to do better in 2018 and 2020. It's a very difficult argument to make, and her lawyers kind of sidestepped a little bit, being like, oh, well, since it's happening, we'll jump on.
Right.
But frankly, I'm more concerned about Louisiana. Please give money to Foster Campbell. We need that seat. I mean, there are things that need to get done, and I don't think the outcome's going to change. Would I love to wake up tomorrow morning and Hillary Clinton be president? Yeah, that'd be fabulous. I just don't think it's going to happen.
And you've been around a long time. Do you believe that Hillary Clinton is just piggybacking off Jill Stein? I mean, how in the world did Jill Stein just suddenly raise almost $7 million when she didn't raise that much in the whole campaign?
I think the mistake here is obviously Mrs. Clinton, who was badly beat and unexpectedly beaten certainly by her own team. Didn't think it was going to happen. I think it kind of looks like a sore loser. I mean, it's over 100,000 votes, those 3 states. You're not going to overturn them. I've been around a long time. You just don't overturn. These votes are pretty carefully counted by the time you get to the process where they are today. And I think to a certain extent it's a mistake. It diminishes a little bit. Trump's been pretty generous to her since the election. He's not going to go after the foundation, a whole bunch of things. And I think to a certain extent it diminishes her just one more little notch. And I think
does it provoke him, do you think?
Anything can provoke him.
Check
So
Twitter, it looks like it did.
anything can provoke him. I think at the end of the day, it diminishes her a little bit, and I think that's the sad part at this point.
Yeah, I don't know, Steve Moore. You think anybody's paying attention to that? I mean, I don't know if can she be diminished more? I mean, she spent 42 years running for president, and now she's looking for work again.
Yeah, being a sore loser is not something you want to be. But people are taking this seriously in Washington, and there is some fear on the part of Republicans that Democrats will find some way to steal this election. And so this is being taken seriously by the political pros and by the Trump people. And look, I don't think there's anything to this. As Ed said, right, Ed, they'd have to turn over around, 3 states or something like that to put him in the winning column. And that just is such a long shot.
Okay.
I wish you'd put it to rest.
But to be fair, Jessica, I mean, I think what is sticking in the craw of Democrats is this idea that they won the popular vote by 2 million votes.
Oh,
and that's what's really upsetting people on the left. And they think maybe it's time to rethink the Electoral College.
Yeah, and we said this in 2000, and there are people on the right when we thought that it was possible that Trump would lose the Electoral College but win the popular vote.
Totally.
Republicans said it. So maybe it's time for that conversation. But Hillary Clinton will not, if this got overturned, those 3 states, and the margins were small. I mean, Michigan is under 1010,000 votes, I believe.
Pennsylvania is 70,000, though. Yeah.
Listen, I mean, when you look at that she won by,
Michigan,
it'll go up to 2.5 million votes. These are not Reagan majorities.
Real quick, we got to run.
Our forefathers had the wisdom to create a republic, not a democracy. And we vote by electoral vote.
You got it.
There we go. All right, panel sticking around. The stock market continuing its record-setting climb this week as the Dow closes an all-time high. But where will the markets go next with the holiday season now underway? Our panel will discuss this and more as we look ahead on Sunday Morning Futures. Stocks closing higher at the end of the week as the market continues its record-setting rise. The Dow and the S&P 500 both soaring over the last few weeks as investors wait to see whether President-elect Trump's spending plans will speed up our economic growth and everything else he has planned. The Dow rising nearly 69 points Friday to close at a record high. So what's ahead for the markets as we enter the holiday season? We have our panel back with us right now, Ed Rollins, Jessica Tarlov, and Steve Moore. Steve, what the markets are reacting to is this idea that, sort of taking the harness off the economy, like the wheels are going to start moving again, with less regulation, lower taxes, an environment that is based on, more practicality than ideology.
I couldn't agree more. And, I've been calling it Donald's Dow. I think the Dow is up nearly 1,000 points since the election. And the point I would make is that when you look at what Donald Trump has proposed on tax policy with dramatic reductions in tax rates, taking the chains of regulations off of businesses, a pro-America energy policy, and I think it was on your Fox Business show a few weeks ago, Melissa, I said that we would get 5 years of 4% growth with the Donald Trump presidency, and I think there's a new buoyancy and optimism you see in investment markets out there, and I think it will continue.
Do you think we can get to 4% for 2017?
Yeah, I do.
Wow.
I think once you look, we can produce $150 billion more energy every year. Our tax plan, I think, adds 1% of GDP, and then getting rid of Obamacare. I mean, there's so many shackles that once you just unleash them, you're going to see, I just think you're going to see a big boom.
Jessica, looking at the data over the weekend, so shopping in-store was down, but that's always expected because people go and shop online. Online shopping was up. The market, has been higher through the year. They say generally when it's higher through November, this portends big gains for the whole year overall. I mean, it feels like sentiment is very positive. What do you think?
I even said to Ed in the green room before we came out here that I feel weirdly optimistic, and this was obviously not my choice candidate. Yeah, I mean, I'm uncomfortable with certain things, but, I think that also there was a poll that was really meaningful last week that showed that of the last 4 presidencies that Americans are more optimistic about the economic prospects under Donald Trump. And that's meaningful. That's why he got elected, right? To be a businessman in the White House. And if you look at his other policies, they're not overwhelmingly popular with a broad swath of Americans. It is about the economy. And I hope that he's successful.
Isn't the economy stupid? Again.
It is, and it's all about jobs, and that's clearly those key Midwest states, the Michigans, the Ohios, the Wisconsins, were all about jobs. And I think to a certain extent he preached that message. Steve Moore's plan, which is very much a part of the Trump plan, is a stimulating plan. It's lowering corporate taxes. It's basically getting
But it's a tough task. I mean, let me push back a little bit, because when you're looking at the people who voted for him out of the Midwest and people that are out of work because of serious changes that have gone on in the economy, where those jobs don't exist anymore, and these people want jobs, they don't want to be retrained. Real quick, Ed, and Steve, then I'll come to you. What are the odds that you can get these people back to work?
First of all, big corporations are not going to come back. It's going to be smaller businesses, and there's going to be more of that, and people are going to be able to borrow money and not have to pay this enormous taxes. My sense is there's a lot of people out there in the job market who want jobs, and they'll take things that they wouldn't take before. So.
Steve, real quick, last word. How does he create jobs for those people whose jobs have disappeared?
Well, through the things I just said, but I think you nailed it, Melissa, that Donald Trump will be really regarded in 4 years based on whether he is able to revitalize those very areas that voted for him so heavily. Places like York, Pennsylvania, and Green Bay, Wisconsin, and Rockford, Illinois.
They've got to find a solution.
We've got to have an economic development there.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. All right, well, we'll be watching close. Still to come, the one thing to watch for in the week ahead on Sunday Morning Futures. Watch for this week. Ed, I'm going to let you go first.
The Treasury Secretary appointment and the Secretary of State appointment, those are two of the big four, and they should come out this week.
Yeah. Jessica, what about you?
I agree with that. It's all about the appointments. And Donald Trump, we know, is not very ideological, so I'm looking at who he's putting in place to actually execute these kinds of policies. And I'm curious about Ben Carson and this HUD appointment. And, you know, he said he didn't think he was qualified for something. Now he thinks that he is. So
you want to see how that plays out.
Well, I want to say I'm concerned about our inner cities, obviously. So.
Yeah. Okay. Steve, what do you think? What's your one thing?
These guys stole mine, but I will say this on Treasury. Steve Mnuchin, who worked with me on that tax plan, possibly Jeb Hensarling, a congressman from Texas, or a pro-growth Democrat, Melissa, Jamie Dimon. I think it'll be one of those three. And I'll also be looking, does the Donald Dow continue to soar?
Yeah, no, those are important things. I'm also going to be watching those sales numbers from the weekend to see how consumers are feeling. Great show, you guys. Thanks so much. That does it for us here on Sunday Futures. Maria Bartiromo is back next week. Media Buzz next. Just prior to the victory speech and after the results were in, nothing will change. Joining me now is Kansas Senator Jerry Moran. He is a member of the Senate Banking Committee and the Senate Appropriations Committee. Senator, thanks for joining us. When you look at the numbers surrounding the recount, Hillary Clinton would have to flip Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and Michigan in order to turn this election around. What do you think are the odds of that?
Well, I think the odds are nearly zero. And so we're going through some efforts that seem to me to be unnecessary. Our country historically, presidential candidates, those who have lost, have rallied around those that won and brought the country together, and I think that's important at this point in our country's history. If there are legitimate allegations about any kind of cyber tampering with voting machines across the country, then in my
Good morning. The Clinton campaign backing a recount in Wisconsin, but not without criticism from the president-elect. Hi, everyone. I'm Melissa Francis, and I'm in this Sunday morning for Maria Bartiromo. She will return next week to Sunday Morning Futures. So what will come of the recount effort in Wisconsin and possibly 2 other states? We're going to hear from a prominent GOP senator in a few moments. Plus, what now for the United States relationship with Cuba? With former dictator Fidel Castro dead and President-elect Trump set to take office, we're going to talk to former CIA Director James Woolsey. And the market's on a roll. Have you noticed?
Elections mean results. Results means moving forward for a new president. And in these instances, nothing that is evident would suggest that the outcome of an election, this election, would be changed. And so it seems to be something less than a legitimate effort to determine the outcome of an election. And that's what a recount is about, is who really won. And in this case, that's been determined. And in fact, as has been indicated, Secretary Clinton conceded that she lost.
The Green Party came forward and said that they looked into the possibility that the results were hacked or some votes were hacked. This was an early theory we heard circulating, and they've decided that they don't have clear evidence of that, but they're still interested in a recount. And as a result, more money is pouring into her coffers. At last count, it was just under $6 million for this recount that I think she raised during the whole campaign. Is there any evidence, though?
I view an election official in one of the states is probably not the place for that consideration to be had. If there's really serious allegations, legitimate ones, then I think this is a matter for law enforcement, the FBI, or intelligence agencies. But this seems to be one of those political efforts that at raising money and stirring the political pot.
Well, I mean, a lot of people are calling to mind recounts of the past, but if you look at the actual raw numbers in Michigan, where the person requesting it has to pay for it if they want to have a recount, he's up by 10,704 votes. Wisconsin is 22,000. Pennsylvania is 70,000. But in the issue of a recount, when it actually changes, aren't we usually talking about more like maybe a 1,000 vote margin? These are big margins, no?
Absolutely. History really probably isn't the perfect guide, other than we've had this sense in our country that
since Election Day. What will this week bring? We're going to get to that with our panel as we look ahead on Sunday Morning Futures. President-elect Donald Trump bashing the effort to recount votes in 3 states, calling it ridiculous and a scam. That's surprising, right? Green Party candidate Jill Stein officially requesting a recount in Wisconsin on Friday and continuing to raise money for recounts in Michigan and Pennsylvania. The Hillary Clinton campaign now joining the effort. Mr. Trump firing back at the plans last night, tweeting, quote, "The Democrats, when they incorrectly thought they were going to win, asked that the election night tabulation be accepted. Not so anymore." And this morning tweeting, Hillary Clinton conceded the election when she called me